committee meeting for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. I'm Commissioner Zoe and I will be chairing this meeting today. So we'll turn to the agenda. And agenda item 1, attendance and apologies. We have no apologies today, so we have a full complement, which is great. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting and actions. Well, there's no actions, and the minutes from the previous meeting are recorded and published onto the OPFCC website. Agenda item 3. Now, we do have a question from the public. So can we have that up on the screen, please? Okay, so this comes from Mr. Peacock from Northallerton. So thank you, Mr. Peacock, for giving us a question. And his question is, to increase EDI in this county would necessitate positive discrimination. Does the fire service confirm that this is intended? Now, who am I handing over to for this one? I think it's Jonathan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mindy is just going to lead on this question and then I'll answer from the service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with this one. Mr. Peacock's understanding of equality, diversity and inclusion is a little bit limited there. For North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, it's not about increasing visual diversity, but also hidden diversity too. So it's not just numbers from ethnic minorities. So positive action is used at the point of application, and it's always the best applicant who is the best person for the job. It's very rare that we would end up in something called a tie-break situation, which is legal, where we would choose one person over another in terms of protected characteristics. And I think that's where Mr. Peacock's coming from. But that's a very rare situation that would happen. And in terms of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, we're working really hard with our underrepresented groups. And we have seen improvements in our workforce diversity and those accessing our services as well.
Thanks, Mindy. Commissioner, ultimately, positive discrimination is illegal, so the service does not participate in that in any way, shape or form. What we do wholeheartedly commit to is positive action. And positive action is where we take steps to lessen the disadvantages and remove barriers and obstacles to people wanting to join the service. We do everything we physically can to attract diverse and inclusive groups to the organisation. Everyone will go through the same selection tests, and then ultimately the best people will then retain the jobs and the roles within the organisation. And we're proud that we do that, and we'll continue to do that to make sure that everything we do demonstrates an open, transparent and inclusive approach. And we're wholeheartedly committed to that. I thank Mr. Peacock for his question, and of course the service is open to any further discussions should Mr. Peacock wish to engage with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much to Mr. Peacock again. Okay, so we're going to go on to agenda item 4, which is the presentation. So I think I'm handing back to you, Jonathan, am I?
Thank you once again. Mindy is going to share the presentation. I'll do the introduction and then hand it over to the brilliant staff we've got. Thank you.
Bear with 2 seconds while I set this up. Double checking you can all see that.
Yes, we're good to go, Mindy. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mindy, I'm going to have to do the next slide, please. Thing.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Super. If you go into the first one for me, please. So, firstly, thank you for this opportunity. It is absolutely essential that we demonstrate to our communities and to yourself, Commissioner, the work that we're doing on equality, diversity and inclusion. Now, ultimately, equality, diversity and inclusion are core values within North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. It's in the breadth and depth of everything we do, and it's important that it retains that way. Now, in the NYFRS, so Her Majesty's Inspectorate, sorry, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Fire and Rescue Services, they released a State of Fire report in 2021. And the report recognised that few services had unambiguous values and didn't give a clear indication of what acceptable workplace performance and behaviours was. They even found that in many services, such values, if they were in place, were not sufficient and the working culture wasn't necessarily communicated to staff effectively. Now, in North Yorkshire, we're ardent and we are creating tangible outcomes for ourselves and our communities. We're strengthening an individual sense of belonging as we strengthen and improve the outcomes for others, including our majority workforce, underrepresented groups, marginalised groups, and also our communities, as they are ultimately the people that we are here for. We wouldn't exist without them. Now, for me, organisational belonging starts with the whole workforce. I and my senior leadership team are passionate that we create that environment. We want everybody to feel physically and psychologically safe, and it's essential if we're going to move forward that we do that. Our message is one of pro-inclusion. We have the behaviours, language and mindsets to ensure that we advocate and support others. Ultimately, we are building an inclusive organisation, and that is internally and also externally, and that's a vital aspect of what we're looking to achieve. Whilst we're striving for greater equality in everything we do across all areas of the service, we still recognise we need to develop knowledge and skills that are aligned to the needs of the community in all aspects. Because when we learn and we understand our communities, then of course we can help ourselves whilst we're helping them. We'll tailor creative and effective solutions that remove those barriers to achieve an inclusive workplace. And we want to engage with our communities so that they see that and they're able to help us develop as an organisation. Now, COVID and the lockdown periods significantly impacted on a lot of conversations, and it impacted on our ability to move forward with our EDI training. However, we are improving that culture, and we are making an environment where everyone feels they can be themselves, they are respected, and of course they need to be respectful to others. We're now heavily investing in the visible aspects of our culture, including our station facilities, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. We're meeting our legal and ethical obligations, and we've launched new equality, diversity and inclusion training. And that's again back to the post-COVID conversations where we need people speaking about this. They need to be unafraid in challenging, and they need to be unafraid in learning the new in new aspects and new cultures and perceptions of others. It's an opportunity to challenge and an opportunity for us to all be involved. And we're ardently again pushing for this across the organisation. For me, inclusivity and us to become an inclusive organisation means we must become a beacon of inclusivity across the community. If we demonstrate we're inclusive, we'll attract and most importantly, retain such talented individuals. We have some amazing individuals in our organisation and we're proud to lead them in the way we do. We need to be supportive of that and make sure that we not only nurture that, but we drive and also learn with that culture as well. If we go to the next slide, please, Mindy. So this is a progression of our timeline. Now, within our timeline, the strategic aspects that we were looking to achieve, the organisation has made great strides, but we acknowledge we have more to do, and we continue to drive that forward. Our culture is improving. We've just recently had a HMI inspection, a HMI NYFRS inspection, and that inspection has given us some more food for thought, and it's given us a reflection that we've still got more to do, and that's essential. Now, our culture and the tangible aspects of culture, not only the physical things around uniform and stations, also relates to people's behaviours and perceptions. And that's what the EDI training is designed to do. It isn't a chalk and talk opportunity where people just listen. It's interactive, it lifts people out, but it's in a safe environment where ultimately we all need to learn because we're all students of this, because we're students of each other. Mindy will discuss the core code of ethics, so I won't go too far into there other than that we have embedded this. We're proud that we've achieved it in the way that we have, and we're going to continue delivering that through on the next stage there, our people strategy. This is delivering our medium-term people plan. So we know where our organisation is, what training and skills our people need, and ultimately where we need to invest heavier or into new aspects in any kind of innovation which will help us move forward. I've mentioned our estates upgrade, and Mindy will give an example later on of the benefits of this. But ultimately, we have an ageing estate. We recognise that, but we fundamentally now started to move forward with this, and we're already seeing the benefits. After discussing at one of the stations yesterday the benefits that crews are seeing from this, it's enormous. And ultimately, we want the communities to come into our workplace and see the development and investments that we're putting in there. Our on-call futures. Now, this is part of our transformation plan. Our on-call are a vital element of our workforce. Without them, we wouldn't be able to provide community safety and operational response into our remote and rural locations. It's an area of development, it's an area of investment, and we are driving forward in this way. Succession planning. Now, this was an area where the HMI found us wanting in a previous inspection. The new strategic leadership team have corrected this. We have a succession planning which is running right through now till the first quarter of next year, where we'll have substantiated all roles from Chief Fire Officer down to our supervisory managers. And that's essential because we have a gap in leadership. And I want our leaders and developing leaders to realise that there are opportunities in our organisation, and we want to develop and invest in our staff first and foremost. Made in EDI training, and I'll just finish on our personal development folders. Now, these folders ultimately are the core of everything we do. This is where the conversations need to be had. It's the start of people's development, but also leaders' opportunity to discuss with individuals the values, behaviours and perceptions that are required to be an employee within North Yorkshire, and ultimately a role model for our organisation in the communities. And that's where it starts, and then it drives upwards throughout the organisation, from firefighter through to the strategic leadership team. We're there, we're developing this, and we're making great progress. And I'll hand over to Mindy and Tony. Thank you.
We're going to talk about recruitment, some of the changes that we've had, but then focus a bit more on the on-call changes that we've had. So in terms of recruitment, we've introduced a recruitment portal, which has helped us greatly in terms of getting away from the paper system. So it's improved our accessibility in terms of candidates being able to access any of our roles on a phone, iPad or any other media that they would wish to. It allows us to better track applicants as well through the system, whereas previously everything was very paper-based, it was very messy, and although things weren't picked up in a timely manner, we can actually click on things and get them quite quickly now. We've got better implementation of adjustments for our candidates who need them as well. So in the past, it would be, again, a paper-based exercise. But for those candidates that now require reasonable adjustments, the system actually flags that to us. So we can actually get those adjustments in place at an absolute timely manner, so people aren't on the back foot coming through the recruitment process with us and can actually do the best they can. It also helps us in terms of applicant data for any of our candidates coming through the system, for any of our ethnic minority data that we want to have a look in terms of people applying for our posts, but also in terms of where people are coming from, posts that people are applying for, and actually things like where people are actually seeing those posts as well. And all that adds to how we actually get our information out there to the people that we want to come into our organisation. In terms of on-call, I'm going to pass over to Tony, who can explain about the changes that have happened in the on-call process.
Thanks, Mindy. So on-call applicants, once they've completed the online application, that application has to be accepted. And when I mean accepted, the hours that they're offering, are they suitable for those stations that they've applied for? If not, a telephone call can be made, and we speak to them and explain sometimes more in depth of what the role will intake for them and how the hours work a little bit better. Once the application has been accepted, interviews and Chester step test should be within 7 days, if that is okay with the applicant's approval. If the applicant can't do it within 7 days, it's not a problem. The local management team will speak to the applicant and fit in what works for everybody else. Some of the problems that we're having there is if they've done their pre-physical questionnaires. Sometimes we have to get the service medical advisor to sign them off. That can be sometimes a slight delay, but in general, we try and get them done within 7 days, or if the applicant wants to move it, then we're happy to do that. After the interview and the Chester step test, and they've been successful, hopefully, they will be given a letter to give to their GP and a visual letter that they need to take to the opticians. One of the sticking points that we have got is the letters and the reports coming back from GPs. This isn't a problem that's unique to North Yorkshire. This is a problem that is nationwide. It's something that we've spent a lot of time on to try and adjust it and try and make it a bit more streamlined. But we are in the hands of NHS GPs, which are already under the cosh. Once they've finish that interview and they've got the letters, we invite them to our practical sessions. Now, previously, our practical sessions have been, they may have to travel from Bentham to Thirsk for a medical, then a different day they would travel to Easingwell for a practical physical assessment. We've streamlined that and we've brought it into all one day in one location. So all our practical days, as we call them, assessment days, are now held at the Transport and Logistic Hub, where they will get their medical done. They will get half-face fit for their mask. corporate workwear will be sized up, PPE will be sized up, and all the fire ground assessments are completed. After that candidate has finished all those practicals and those measurements, one of the management team will speak to that candidate and tell them they are either successful or they've been unsuccessful. But this will all be determined to toxicology reports from the medical. If they are successful, we will get the candidate within 72 hours a trainee contract. So what a trainee contract means is they can go onto their local on-call station and then they can start training with the local team, the local watch. And they can start doing all their pre-safe to ride training that they need to get accomplished before they go onto that course. And once they have finished that, they will be put onto a safe to ride course and then move into the normal on-call process of evaluation. And that's how we've streamlined it. We had our first practical session yesterday up at Transport and Logistics. Went really well. The candidates even fed back that it was good. Couple of hours, 3 hours per candidate it took. And I think it's the way forward. Yes, we had a few teething problems like all these new systems do, but there's nothing that we can't overcome on that. And that's how we've changed the onboarding system for on-call candidates.
Tony, that's spot on. I'll just move on to strengths a little bit as well, just to tell you about how we've introduced strengths. So we've trialled strengths in terms of our senior management teams at the minute, and we're trying to move away a little bit from personal qualities and attributes, what we used to call PQAs, because what we've found is strengths gives us more in terms of what individuals need for the role, and also what we're looking for in terms of individuals coming into our services. PQAs can be learned and often don't give us a lot of what we are looking for in terms of individuals for our service. In terms of strengths, they look more in terms of potential, attitude to change and motivations. It is a big work in progress at the minute, and we are looking to maybe roll this out for other roles. But at the minute, we're trying to work with our current people we're working with groups from watch manager, crew manager and firefighters at the minute to try and draw up the frameworks to see if they will work for those roles going forward. And we're actually consulting with external partners as well to make sure that we get everything right, but also to make sure the process is transparent as well. Because what we've found is with strengths, it's being impact assessed, so actually it's more transparent than the PQA process was in the past. Okay.
Can I just ask a couple of questions on that slide, if you don't mind, Mindy? So, because obviously we're talking about EDI, can you tell me what proportion of on-call and whole-time firefighters are women? You may not be able to, you might have to get the information to me, but you know, we've heard a lot about the recruitment process and Tony as well for the on-call, which is really welcomed. But how is that impacting for receiving an increase in diversity into the service? I know it's early days, Tony, for yours, but what do you expect to see? How is the change here? How are these things that you're putting in? How do you expect to see an increase coming through of diversity?
In terms of change, we've actually seen a lot of changes. So you can actually see it from people actually getting onto the course, the actual diversity of recruits coming in. There is a change there, whereas in the past it was all white males on that course. If you'd like to come and attend our next Safe to Ride course, you'd actually find it is a bit of a mix. Mm-hmm. And actually we're seeing that come through a lot more. And I think the changes with the process, actually it's more manageable for individuals to get that time away from what they're doing. It could be family life, could be their primary employment, and it's just a little bit more manageable with the on-call side of things, because ultimately with on-call, historically people have had something else on the side as well, such as a primary employment or other responsibilities. And I think it just helps with that side of things to make it a more attractive proposition.
Yeah.
In terms of the stats as well, I can get those to you, but I wouldn't want to make a guess at them.
No, that's absolutely fine. And Mindy, I am putting you on the spot there. But thank you for that. And I can see how, especially if we're on call, you know, you're absolutely right, that a lot of the people that are applying do have other jobs as well. So if we can streamline that process, it makes it a lot better. So thank you very much. Okay, we can go on to the next question. Sorry, the next slide.
Thank you. So this next one is about the diversity champions and a little bit about the networks as well. So recently we've launched diversity champions for Fire and Rescue Service. So this is something fairly new for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. And the reason why we wanted to do this is because we know there's a lot of great work happening from our district-based staff, from our staff in prevention protection, from all our workforces. But actually, we want to kind of formalise that a little bit more and actually use those brilliant people we've got out there to actually help us in sharing our best practice and knowledge across the service, and also helping us in those attraction events to make the service more inviting to people that wouldn't normally consider it. And a lot of the work has already been done informally, but this will help us kind of reinvigorate what we've done in the past as well, and give us a bit more resources there as well at the same time. Our staff already do that tremendous job in raising awareness, but the ambition for the diversity champions is that, as I've said, we'll support at positive action events. We'll also help with recruitment panels as they would supply that unbiased view. They would also assist in communications across the service, but also be a point of contact. Because ultimately, once we develop the diversity champions, we're looking to have specialist champions as such. So for each protected characteristic or for any other issue that we have arising within service. So it would be more of an internal champion to start off with, but then extending outwards. In return for our staff helping us with this, we would actually keep developing our staff and offer CPD events regularly, and we're hoping to kick all this off in the beginning of the new year.
Mindy, can I ask a question about the networks, please? The EDI staff networks carrying out both, you know, what work are they doing internally and with the communities to improve EDI?
So in terms of our networks, we've got 5 networks currently. Some of them are fairly new, and what they're doing is they're going out into the communities. So our LGBT community are working with a local youth group, raising awareness of what we're doing, how we're doing it, but also inviting them into station to make it not, I can't get my right words out, sorry. So it's not as scary a place to come in, and it would be a place that they would maybe consider in the future coming in and approaching us, and maybe consider it being a job for the future. So it's kind of working with individuals, showing them what we do and just raising that awareness as well. Because in the past, we haven't really worked a lot with our underrepresented groups. So our networks are doing a fab job, just breaking those barriers.
Thank you. Jenny, can I bring you in, please?
Thank you, Zoe. I was just going to ask, have you set some expectations about how you will assess the impact of the diversity champions, and do you know what success looks like?
At the minute, we're really early doors, so we've just launched, but we're hoping, I think it'll be mid next year, we'll have the framework in place and we'll be able to kind of judge in terms of whether we're making any progress or not. We want to align it to the equality framework also that we'll have running at the same time for fire, so we'll be able to evidence what we're actually doing and what success is. Is that okay?
Thank you.
That's right. Jonathan, you wanted to come in on this, please.
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you. And Jenny, thanks for the question. It is in its infancy that we are releasing this. We have a new strategic leadership team with the members forming in December, and they will become avid champions for the service. On the question around what does success look like, for me, success would be that we're not sat here discussing this. That would be the success, that we had actually then delivered an inclusive and diverse workforce. But of course, we've all got a long way to go on that across all organisations. So success will be that we will continue to measure the impact we're having We'll evaluate that impact. And of course, this ties into the positive action work that we're doing, particularly with the, and as Tony demonstrated with his in-depth review of the on-call, we're demonstrating that we're critically reviewing every area of the organisation. And we're going to holistically then apply all of that learning into every area that we possibly can. We're changing, we're developing, and that is where the success will come, because we'll be able to demonstrate that to the public and to yourselves through PAM and every other avenue of governance that we are delivering that change, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And JD, I don't know if you want to answer this question, but, you know, in the inspection in 2019, it found a worrying lack of understanding about the benefits of diversity in the workplace from some staff and middle managers. So really, I hear about what you're doing now, but more externally. But what have we done since 2019 to really understand, you know, to improve it, the benefits of diversity in the workforce?
Well, this, Commissioner, for me, is around the conversations again, and this was limited whilst we were in COVID, which we recognise. Our report did find us effective through COVID, but of course that didn't look at the cultural aspects, and that's the core element of this, because culture isn't just the surface that you see on uniforms or anything else. It's in the behaviours and the perceptions and the cognitive thoughts of individuals, and we've done a lot within there. We are extremely visible within our workforce and around all of our stations. We are delivering that message and the language that we need to see change. And consequently, we are seeing that being played back in how people respond to us and also how people respond to the communities. Ultimately, it's our responsibility to educate and drive that change. And we have to understand, of course, that the representation of different minority and ethnic groups within North Yorkshire isn't of significant scale. So we're working to be reflective of our communities, and that's where we need to continue that work stream. Our evaluation of this as a self-awareness demonstrated that we need to do more. This is reflected in the training that we're now delivering through the organisation, and of course, while we're having the networks and champions to address every avenue that we possibly can. We know there's more to do, but we'll continue to do it.
Thank you.
Move on to the next slide. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about the facilities and the estates project. A little bit of the history was that in 2004 was the last full review of the estates. And then 15 years later, we've actually done another review and found that although we had facilities in place for our staff, they weren't the ultimate best. They were basically at the minimum, and they didn't fully support us in creating that diverse workforce that we want, and didn't accommodate people actually working at our stations and those wanting to use our stations. So in terms of what we've actually done, and the reasoning for change is, the ultimate reason is we want to create a diverse workforce, but in creating a diverse workforce, we need to have the facilities in place for our workforce to be able to do their jobs. So that's the ultimate driver for this. And we've worked with estates and visited every fire estate, on-call, control, all our fire stations and fire safety buildings, and established a plan of works. Now, I'm very honest in this, we have a very ageing estate, and in an ideal world, we would love to just build new stations, but that does take a lot of time to do. So what happened was we devised a plan of minor and major works that needed carrying out. A lot of the minor works have already been carried out and often involved changes to doorways, accessible car parks, signage, and things like that. In terms of some of the major works, they required a lot of the facilities to be basically ripped out and started again or completely replaced. An example of this is at Selby Fire Station. We had a big change in our workforce at Selby Fire Station, so the facilities that were there didn't actually accommodate the staff we had there. So we had to prioritise that station to ensure that we made those changes immediately. Now, those works have actually happened at Selby Station. They're just literally tidying those up now. But that's going to mean that actually all those staff that are stationed at Selby have facilities that they can use at any time now without having to worry about, is there enough for them? The other stations that are going to require some major works are Scarborough and Whitby as well. And in terms of any of the major changes that we're making to the stations, we've consulted with staff so they're fully aware of what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And also that they may possibly be displaced slightly, but we've made sure that this doesn't affect any turnout times as well. Has anybody got any questions on that one?
Yes, Mindy, what is the main challenge you face from making the necessary improvements to the estates?
The ultimate one is because of reasons out of our control, there wasn't any investment for quite a number of years. So we have got quite an ageing estate. So it isn't in a state that we would have really liked it to have been in. So there is a lot to do. And I think that's hampered it a little bit. So it's great that we've got this programme in now. We've managed to get the budget in place, and actually it's not just going to be we're doing these changes and that's it. It's going to be an ongoing programme, which I'm really proud of, because I feel that we are going to continually keep making changes now for our staff and for anyone using our stations, which will actually keep our stations working, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Jenny, I'm going to bring you in, and then Jonathan.
Thank you, Zoe. I've just heard what you said, Mindy, about the changes being about a continuous improvement programme, which is great. But I'm really interested to understand from the identification of the things that you wanted to change based on that initial assessment, how far along that programme of work are you, and when do you see that will be complete?
So we're quite far along, but there was a little bit of delay with all the things of COVID-wise, which we do have to mention every now and again. But the contractors have been, I want to say installed, but I feel that's the wrong word. The contractors are working on it and are working through. We've got the next set of major works to commence in January and February. So those are for the two major lots of work. So I think around about springtime, a lot of the major works will have been completed. Fingers crossed there isn't any more delays, but that's just pending if there is any delays along the way.
Thanks, Mindy.
Okay. I think there was another question.
Jonathan.
Thanks, Commissioner. And just in answer to both of those points, Mindy's right in that we've suffered some delays in this, which we recognise. There were contractor delays and also, of course, within COVID. However, that didn't stop us making progress. Throughout that time, we've still made wherever possible changes to the estate, and anything where we're able to do that, obviously continuing through COVID. And I think one of the primary things to address is, whilst our financial situation is known to everybody, the new strategic leadership team is making that change. Ultimately, the investment in the estate isn't just for an external aspect of recruitment for equality and diversity. It's to make our own workforce and the majority workforce feel like they belong in this organisation. And that is absolutely essential to us. They do. And of course, this is improving their well-being and their workplace, as well as, being not only inclusive to others, but people recognising the diversity in how our stations are across our estate and across our duty systems. And we'll continue to make that change. Thank you.
Simon, can I bring you in, please?
Thank you, Zoe, and thanks, colleagues, for addressing the issue of delay. So, Zoe, I know you're always keen to be candid with the public in connection with these sorts of business issues, and perhaps to on your behalf as your monitoring officer, I could just take the opportunity to indicate to members of our communities that are watching this broadcast how concerned I know you were about the delays that have been occasioned, whilst we do understand the difficult circumstances that organisations of all shapes and sizes have come through in terms of getting capital works progressed. This was a very important programme of work, and as you know, on your behalf, both the Chief Fire Officer and myself have taken this issue very seriously and sought firm and definitive assurance about the delivery of the capital works on time and on budget, based on the reprofiling of the work. And I know you know this anyway, but but our communities may not. This is an issue which you've indicated you will wish to have regular assurance about going forward in the context of your executive board. And I can assure you, just as I'm sure JD would, that it is an issue that is firmly and will remain on the agenda for the Fire and Rescue Service Strategic Leadership Team, where you are, of course, extensively represented both in terms of OPFCC and the service leadership.
Yes, thank you, Simon, for saying that. And I do work very closely with yourself and Jonathan on this matter. And you're right, it is a point that I'm very, we must make sure that we stick to these timelines. I know sometimes it happens, there's a bit of slippage, but I'm very focused in on it. So thank you for that, Simon. OK, Mindy, on to you again for the next bit. Thank you.
Just the last little bit on that. One of the reasonings behind the changes to some of the facilities was also to also ensure that we had privacy and dignity for all our members of staff as well, because of some of the ages of our buildings. They didn't actually give a lot of privacy and dignity in terms of the roles that they had to carry out. So a lot of the works will actually give that back as well.
You might want to give an example there, if you don't mind.
So one example for that is the showering facilities that we used to have at we still have at some of our stations until it changes. It used to be the old school style where you used to have to walk through, and it's not very appropriate. So this is where we've kind of moved away from that and moved to a kind of all-in-one. So it's a bit like a pod that you would have in a swimming baths where you can change and shower all in one, and that actually gives a person back a bit more privacy and dignity, but also still being able to do the job as well.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll just move on to training if nobody else has got any questions on that one. Okay. Whoops. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to cover a little bit on training. So in terms of the equality, diversity and inclusion training, a little bit of background again with this. We carried out a gap analysis some months ago and found that for police and fire, there was a bit of a gap in terms of what was being delivered to the whole workforce. So from an enable point of view, we developed a business case, and from that business case, we secured a budget, and it was we secured a budget and we secured a trainer through procurement who are called Pearl Catchers to roll out our programme of training. In terms of the training that we're rolling out, it isn't the bog standard where you would sit there and just listen and be talked at, because from what we found from talking to our staff and from having focus groups, we needed to move away from that for the training to be beneficial. So the training that we're delivering is in 2 modules, and we've started with anyone with supervisory responsibilities, and it's very interactive. And from that point of view, it gives a better learning, achievement for everybody, but also it gives that chance to actually reflect on what's happened in the first module and then going deeper with the second one. We're also looking at a new online module for fire, because the previous modules we hadn't been updated in some time. So those modules are now being released at the end of this month, and actually will update everybody in terms of legislation, best practice and case studies. And it's just to update that ongoing knowledge, and those will be mandatory for everybody. Just going on to the Core Code of Ethics, we had the Core Code of Ethics launched not too long ago, and this has been delivered to all members of staff. So it's been rolled out to everybody within North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, and it's been very much, it's been taken very well and received very well. There's been lots of interaction with it, and station staff are now actually using the Core Code of Ethics in what they're delivering every day, and using what they've learned in their activities that they're planning in terms of reaching out to the community, and what they're planning in terms of training. So it's actually feeding right through everything that we're doing, which is absolutely brilliant.
Mindy, can I just ask a question on that? So, how do you know that? And can you give me an example, please?
So in terms of knowing that the core code of ethics has been very well received, we asked for feedback in terms of when we delivered the core code of ethics, and we've had a little look at the feedback from that, and that was all very good. And then when we've delivered some of the sessions, because I delivered some of those as well and had it delivered to me also, it's a very different way of having some training delivered. It was, again, quite interactive, so you're not kind of being talked at, and it actually got you thinking about what the case studies are, and they were actually relevant to your role, which I think is what the good thing about it is. You can actually relate to what's actually being said and actually fit it in with your own ethics as well.
Are we planning on recording good practice to share with other stations?
Good question. I don't know, is my honest answer. But we could look at that actually to develop that along with the new online modules as well. So we could have a little look into that.
And if you don't mind me asking a quick question on the EDI training. So what percentage of the workforce has received the training, and how will you know when it's embedded, and what outcomes are you expecting?
In terms of who it's been rolled out to, so everybody who's a crew manager and above will have received the training by January next year. So that is, I can't tell you the percentages off the top of my head. I'm probably the worst person to ask in terms of numbers. But in terms of knowing that it's been embedded, actually from talking to people already and actually going to stations, you can see there's a bit of a change in how things are being discussed, how things are being planned, even like considering when they're doing events, it's that kind of people impact assessment that people are thinking about more in terms of when they're going out. So for me, there's already that bit of change, and there's a little bit of a change with behaviours already. So I've seen it from my own point of view, but we probably need to get that down so it's quantifiable as well.
Yeah, and the other thing is, how often do you revisit this training? Are you expecting to do that?
Yeah, the training is supposed to be revisited every 3 years, but in terms of the cycle of the face-to-face training, it's going to be set in modules, and then there's going to be what we called hot topics in between. So looking at every day, looking at issues such as menopause in the workplace and menopause, and also looking at neurodiversity, but having those hot topics change on a yearly cycle. So actually everybody's getting some input very regularly. And then the cycle will start again on the face-to-face on that 4th year.
JD, Jonathan, sorry, can I bring you in?
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner. Just on the point around what we know, again, what success will look like and how we evaluate it. I'd just like to ensure that the public and also our workforce do not feel that we are demonstrating that, as we've seen in some reports of services, that there is a toxic culture. Categorically, that is not the case within North Yorkshire. And having worked here around other services and external commercial organisations, North Yorkshire is an amazing place to work. We have open culture, we have a transparent culture, and with people that are extremely welcoming both to the colleagues and also to members of the public. But as ever, in everything, there are always things that we can improve upon and do more. And this is what our strategy is about. But categorically, for anybody thinking of joining the service or thinking of joining in any role, it's an amazing place to work. And we welcome anybody to our door, to have that conversation and to join our team in any role whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you again, Mindy.
Thank you. It's just the last little bit to update about the SHINE programme. So the SHINE programme was a programme aimed at our underrepresented staff, both for NYP and NYFRS. And we had a couple of colleagues who attended that, and they found it really beneficial to be on the programme with other people from underrepresented backgrounds, and found it really useful in developing their own skills and career plans, and actually being able to share their own experiences with other people that have had those similar experiences. So it was just to say that we will probably look at running this again so that more people can actually attend and feel the benefit of it. And this was kind of part of our positive action programme to try and encourage our underrepresented groups to try and go for that next step. Okay, then I'll pass over to you, JD.
Crikey, you'd think I'd be able to unmute by now. So thank you for that. And this nicely ties into when we talk around what success would look like for us. Well, again, it would be amazing to think that we were constantly talking that we'd achieved this and that we were wholly reflective of our communities and that everybody in their thought processes and behaviours were inclusive of all diverse areas of our communities. However, we know we've more to do. So our future ambition and linked to our strategy is that we have an open and inclusive organisation, that we support and value our people, as we already do, but we're able to improve the retention and career progression for current and future staff. Our future will be that we have a physical environment, including the estate and our equipment and our uniform, that supports our ambition to be an inclusive employer, and that people see us as a beacon of choice within their communities for a career, either short or long, however they come into the organisation, but they then bring the skills and the knowledge and the diverse and cognitive aspects that they can to help us develop as an organisation. Everything matters to us. We are going to continue to review and update our policies, our training material, everything, because all of these things are reflective and have to be reflective of the values and the inclusive way in which we work. We must continue to educate ourselves and, of course, how we interact with our partners. We can't do this alone. We don't intend to, and we want everybody to help us on this journey. It's important, of course, that we demonstrate that we're an inclusive employer, and that's the part where I talk around our workforce belonging. Ultimately, our staff are the biggest advocate for the values and behaviours of North Yorkshire. We have some amazing staff, and I'm extremely proud to lead an organisation where people are at the heart of all we do. We'll continue to improve, but we're going to continue to embed and onboard everything that we've just discussed here today. And just as a message to anybody, again, thinking of joining our on-call firefighters or indeed our whole time when we recruit, please do. Never be afraid to come and challenge, because you will be working in an organisation where you are safe psychologically and physically, and everything you do and everything you can bring to those skill sets would be valued and welcomed. Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, what more can I say there, JD? Completely echo everything you say. I can see that there's an awful lot going on, a lot of work there. So thank you so much for coming to talk to us. So that goes to Mindy, Tony and Jonathan. Thank you. It was very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so we'll turn now to agenda item 5, and that's performance update. And James, I think I'm handing over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so I'm going to present to you the performance pack for November. Could somebody please just confirm that that's showing on your screen?
Yes, James, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Please let me know if there are any questions as we go through, as I won't be able to see hands. But let's take us to the first slide, which will demonstrate our demand for the last 3 months. I'd like to draw your attention to the top left-hand chart, which is across those 3 months, breaking it down. And what you will see on that top line there is our performance for the month of September. And that is nearly 200 calls less than the previous 2 months. Now, that really reflects a number of things. So first of all, is the fact that...
James, I'm really sorry. I don't think your computer's gone on to the next page. And I presume that's what Matt and Jonathan were about to say with their hands up.
I shall try and reshare because it's changed my end. So 2 seconds, if you could bear with me. Okay, can you now see that?
That's brilliant, thank you.
Okay, great. So again, I'll recap there. If I draw your attention to the top left-hand chart, it breaks it down for the last 3 months, moving backwards from September. The top line there is September, which you'll see is a reduction in the number of demand calls that we've had as a fire and rescue service. Now, what that does highlight is actually how busy we were in the previous 2 months. As we know, on a busy day in July, we received 172 calls on one day, and that good spell of weather helped to drive some of that demand also into August. We can break that down a bit more in the next slide, but if I bring you down to the chart below in the bottom left-hand corner, again, just echoing that point, if we're looking at year on year, we are still significantly up this year based upon that particularly dry spell that we had, and that's really affected those figures. If I could take us onto the next slide then, that breaks it down into our top 10 incident types. And what that's telling us, again, if you look at the left-hand side and you look at all the charts starting from our special services and along that bottom line there, they remain relatively static, those types of incidents. And if we look to the right, on the right-hand side, what we can see is a small increase, as we've said before, year on year around some of those special service type calls where we're assisting other services. But obviously, what we want to focus on is the exception that we've just been talking about, which is in those columns in 2 and 3 around fires in the open. In particular, you'll see, again, a significant increase for the year, and also particularly in the months of July and August. Also, false alarms around that time of year when we experience good weather. That means people use buildings in a different types of ways. They leave doors open where they wouldn't normally. People are in and out. Building works quite often go on in that time, and of course, people are also on holiday during that time. So people are using buildings in different ways, and it's quite often a pattern that we do see around that time, and that readjusts again around September time, which this is evidence of. Just pointing on those two elements then around those exceptionally high calls that we had around the weather, and the preventative work that we had already carried out, and we do it on a yearly basis periodically leading into that period. Around wildfire, youth engagement with landowners and those managing public spaces. Well, we're obviously going to look at that again next year, as I'd already said, to ensure that we can explore as many different other avenues as we can to, again, try and reduce that figure next year. We move us on then to our false alarms. What this demonstrates on both slides there, comparison against 2022 and 21, is that it's relatively static. Now, I've talked in previous months about the 4 stages of intervention that and prevention that we've talked about, which ranges from that very early education stage of when we get called to a premises by fire crews. We'll give that initial education, talk through some of the challenges there and how to prevent a reoccurrence, and that ranges right the way up to a stage 4 of where we continue to increase that engagement and to a final resort of enforcement action where we feel that responsible people aren't complying with the fire safety legislation. We're too early really to see the impact of that in these figures, because that's only really been introduced fully in the months of September, October, November. So we're really too early to start seeing any of the effects of that coming through yet. But I would certainly hope in the new year we'd start to see some of that play out. In addition to that, of course, we've got the changes that we're looking to bring in around the RRM. So we're making good progress around that, and some of the factors around, if we're looking to bring in the option of charging, again, we need a period of monitoring that to how that would play out. So there's again, that's being looked at the moment, and again, around the types of response that we would provide to automatic fire alarms and what is most appropriate will form part of the fire cover review, which again is part of that service improvement area.
James, can I just come in there and just say that we are spotlighting on that in our January PAM about the new policy changes as well. So we'll be talking more in depth in January about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. If we move on to this slide then, if I could draw your attention to the right-hand chart. So this is about our false alarms to automatic fire alarms. You can see a distinct pattern there. Again, really echoing the point I made earlier on, that the demand is driven in part by the time of year. People are using their buildings in a different way. The weather is different. We have some of those calls attributed to insects in detectors, and again we look to provide that education to those people or responsible people around how we can reduce some of those calls. I could take us straight on then to appliance availability, and again there's some area for improvement here, and absolutely acknowledge that. If we look at September in comparison to July and August, again, we know there were challenging months for a number of reasons, holiday periods, and our ongoing challenges with some of our recruitment and retention points. We would expect to have seen the peak of that play out in July and August, and start to return to more manageable levels from September onwards. Of course, we recognise we've got the Christmas period coming up, and again forward planning for that with our staff to ensure we maximise the availability. Part of the changes that we're on with to help support that is our Firewatch upgrade. So as I've talked about before, we have 4 lines of planning and implementation of providing fire cover. So the first part is that pre-planning stage, which is done by our district teams. Then we move on to our operational staffing reserve. So we look where those pre-planned gaps are. We supplement that with additional trained staff in locations to ensure we maximise the number of appliances available in key areas associated with risk. And then our fire control on a more dynamic basis, on a daily basis, we'll look at that and again proportion that against our fire cover model. And finally, our silver officers will provide a layer of professional judgment on that where they need to. Now, one of the things that's going to help support that is the changes with Firewatch. That it's going to enable a live sort of transmission, if you like, of global availability to be seen by all staff, from those local district managers right up to those silver officers. So on a more dynamic basis, not only in the pre-planning stage, we can continually work on a day-to-day basis with that shared awareness and everybody driving to the same goal. At the moment, although that's done, it's done on a manual basis. So someone will have physically go in to check each of those stations, and then that will be transferred to another spreadsheet and so on and so forth. And although it's a manageable process, it's not as effective and efficient as we'd like it to be, hence why we're looking to bring that in as part of that upgrade with the Firewatch system, which I can say is making good progress. If I could take us on then to more of a breakdown into the individual stations. Again, we know there are challenges there. Some of the challenges around that are with our junior officers. We've talked about that in the previous months, that we have a reluctance of some staff at the moment to undertake the role of a junior officer, if you like, to be in charge of a fire appliance. And there's a range of factors involved in that. So one of the things is we ensure our staff, as you would do, follow the most rigorous training around and most robust to the most robust level to provide that assurance to both our own staff for safety and the public that those people are the right people with the right skills in the right places. Now, that is, as you would imagine, quite a rigorous process, and that doesn't appeal to everybody. So we've got a challenge to try to encourage our staff and to develop them into these roles, and to feel more comfortable in taking that level of responsibility on. And we're looking at how we can maintain the same level of standard and of training and competence of those people, but in more diverse ways and more flexible ways, particularly when we're talking about the on-call and the time it may take people to commit to that level of training. And we continue to do that.
James, can you just give me an example of how you are supporting and encouraging staff to do that?
Yes, of course. So one of the first things is breaking some of that training up into modules and manageable chunks. So rather than before asking people to come on an intense period of activity, where that would mean they would need to ask their employer for some time off using their holidays, in many cases in a single chunk, we'd look to break that up. We'd look to break that up also, or we do that and provide that support through district managers as well, through formal and informal coaching and mentoring. And we've just recently launched our new coaching and mentoring program, which specifically targets the on-call as one of our key focuses, because we recognise the challenges that we do have in the on-call. So again, it's just about providing that close contact. We know with the on-call that a lot of the time they are away in their primary employment, but when they can engage with us and we have that time with them, it's quality time and in many cases it's those conversations. I think that's been repeated on many occasions already throughout this presentation. It's about having that local contact and that coaching and mentoring approach, rather than just a formal hard-lined traditional training. We're diversifying that and being more supportive in our approaches.
Thank you.
No problem. So some of the other ways that we're supporting that at the moment, we, as you know, run regular safe to roll courses for new recruits. And we can say that in November we had 9 successful candidates that passed that training and that will be landing on station very soon. We have another course in February where we aim to again have a full course. Tony touched on earlier on some of the practices that we've done there to improve the experience both for our current staff but also through that recruitment phase. So moving that both the fitness testing and medicals and everything that people are involved to do in one location at our training and logistics hub now. And I know that started or we improved on that last month. So again, we should start to see that playing out. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide then.
Can I just ask another question on that slide, the previous one?
Yes.
And we look at like Harrogate as an area, and
Yes.
the on-call stations there, Ripon, Summerbridge and Masham, and they've all got, well, although it is better for September, they really are below 55%, aren't they? And then I always see Sherburn, and I'm just wondering, are we really struggling to recruit on-call in those areas, because they're always low, aren't they? I know in Huntington it's different and we're going to be putting a big drive in there, but I always notice these other stations. Thank you, Tony, if you want to come in on that.
Yeah, I think I'll be the best one to answer that, son, as those Harrogate stations are mine, Commissioner. If we take them one by one, really, if we look at Masham, I've got a lot of sickness in Masham at this moment in time. I've got a lot of people that are on sabbatical, as in taking a little bit of time out. I've got 3 officers in Masham, and we've got only 1 available at this moment in time for various reasons. So that's the problem that I have at Masham. If we look at Ripon on call, we have 2 junior officers. One of them is also employed whole time by ourselves and works on a station, and one of them works for the Defence Fire Service. If the aligners then their shifts are together, then that obviously leaves me a problem with no officer available to take the appliance out unless I draft one in. Summerbridge, historically, as well we know, has always been a hard place for us to recruit. Funnily enough, just before this meeting, a new application dropped onto the station manager's desk, which we have processed, as we spoke about earlier. We are starting to move our catchment area out a little bit, and Summerbridge is one of those areas that we are spending a lot of time looking to see how we can improve the availability and improve our workforce in Summerbridge, because we have a low workforce because we can't get people to come and join the service in that area. But once again, Summerbridge, we only have one junior officer. That junior officer has personal commitments, and therefore, you know, when that person's off, then we have to draft another officer in, or the appliance doesn't have an officer to take it out. We are very mindful, and I'm very mindful in the Harrogate area, that those figures are where they are. And I can assure you that we are doing our utmost to improve those figures where we can.
So you've mentioned a little bit there, Tony, about what you're doing, but, you know, for example, can you tell me what you're doing in Ripon? You know, can you give other examples about what are we actually doing? I think you knew that question was probably going to come off the back of that.
So Ripon's really good. You look at Ripon as a city, which it is. Why are we struggling in Ripon? We are getting people through the door in Ripon. We have no doubt whatsoever about that. We are getting people through the door. The problem then that we have is getting them through the fireground assessment test. For example, in a recent day, we've had 2 candidates from Ripon that have not met the set standard in certain areas. So we have had to take them away and re-coach them, do some more training. And last night, which is a Wednesday night when Ripon, our on-call staff do their training, we had members of the training team taking those individuals to one side and giving them specific tasks to do to try and encourage them and to help them get through the next test that they were doing in January. So we are getting people through the door at Ripon. The problem is then moving them onto that Safe to Ride course.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, Tony.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think there's probably one other thing just to mention there as well is around one of the things we are seeing is that cost of living sort of playing out. That again, we've got firefighters telling us, you know, that as far as availability goes, they need to go further afield at times for work. We know that obviously some of that commitment around providing a service to our public, if you like, sometimes impacts on their primary employment, and I think that's a really important factor when we're facing some of those challenges at the moment, because some of that is other conversations that are playing out on fire stations, and we're just cognizant of that. But again, thank you, Tony, for providing us with the detail.
Matt, can I bring you in, please?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I'm just conscious, just to make sure, particularly from a public's point of view, they're aware that on-call isn't an issue just in North Yorkshire. This is a national issue. It has a number of issues based around some of the history where we are with on-call, but rest assured from a North Yorkshire point of view, we're doing everything we can to mitigate those issues, both locally, but also we have a seat at the national table, and we are lobbying regularly, making sure that, particularly from a NFCC point of view, which is the National Fire Chiefs Council, that they're aware of our local concerns and making sure that we are removing those barriers proportionately to allow us to maintain that sustainability of what is an unbelievably important element of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next slide then, if we could. And this is a really important slide to understand what this is telling us. So the blue lines there are telling us what our availability is, and the orange line is telling us what our demand is. Now, what I must stress to the public here is that this is not a direct correlation, but what it does demonstrate is there are pinch points. So what it demonstrates is that where our demand is high, our availability is lower. But what it doesn't show, what it's not showing, to be very clear, is that the demand outstrips the resource because there's a gap between the orange line and the blue line. That is not the case. It's just demonstrating that we have a high demand at certain times of the day, and that is against where our availability at times is lower. And that is where the RRM aims to resolve some of those challenges, and that we ensure that we have availability during those peak demands, and that we've got right people, in the right places at the right times. And some of those things within the RRM talk about those peak times, and again self-rostering to solve some of those particular challenges. But that will play out as those details of that service improvement starts to materialise.
James, I've got a question here.
Yes.
And I'm always told that on a night time, on-call cover's very good. But here we can see that from the hours of, the busiest time point from about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it starts quietening off between 9 and 10 o'clock at night. So the word nighttime, would you say that's from 9 o'clock at night through till 6 o'clock in the morning? Because I'm just a bit concerned, because on call, they all have other jobs as well, and we are fantastically grateful to our on call because they are fantastic. But I would have thought that most jobs, unless they're shift ones, finish about 5 by 6 o'clock by the time they get home. And I'm interested the piece between the times between like 6 o'clock at night and 9 o'clock at night, and why is it that still our on call is quite low in those times? I might not be able to answer that, but I'm just, I think it's important to ask that question. Jonathan.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner. I think the answer to this lies in the fact that we employ the wonderful things called human beings. We're all there, we all have families, we all have commitments, we all have after school clubs. There's everything that ultimately we place a great demand on our on-call firefighters to be available. And we just need to recognise that, of course, they have their families. They have, as we all do, chaotic, busy lifestyles, which involves kids and everything else, which make us rich in everything we are. But we also recognise that, of course, that between those hours of 6 down to around 9 o'clock, that does impact on our availability. One of the key things that we are inputting now that we have heavily invested in is the Firewatch app. Now, this application is what manages our availability across the service. It will become, in the very near future, literally app-based on the telephone, so that people can book on and off, which will increase, from all the conversations we're having with our on-call, it will increase their availability. Instead of having to take extra time away from family, to go to the station, to book on, to then become available. And hopefully we'll be reporting that in the near future. But ultimately, everything you've said there, and as said, is true. We just need to recognise that we place a great demand, and the communities place a great demand on our on-call firefighters, but they are ultimately, as you and I are, we all have kids, we all have family demands, and that reflects in their availability. But we're grateful for what they do. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. I completely echo once again what you've just said too. But I think it was important to try and understand and ask that question. Thank you.
No, I agree, Commissioner. Thank you.
I'll take us on then to our protection activity. So this is our business fire safety activity that both operational crews take part in and our specialist staff. And I think this is a real success story again this month with protection. So if I draw your attention first of all to the top right hand box, which talks about our specialist staff in particular, if we look at the month of September, where you can see activity went from 53 activities to 282. And there's a reason for this. It's a very targeted week, if you like, Business Fire Safety Week. And what that was targeted towards this year was our small to medium places of work in the outlying areas. So as we know, we manage our workloads based upon risk, but we also know that some of the outlying areas we don't necessarily visit as frequently because there isn't that same level of risk. However, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to provide support and advice to those areas. And of course, when it comes to automatic fire alarms as well, that doesn't discriminate whether that's a high risk building or a medium risk building, for example, and that still plays out in our demand. So there are a number of things there that, again, and rationale for why those premises were targeted. And that's a real success story, that we've had 282 engagements with giving that guidance and advice to people that may not be as aware and receive a visit from us as frequently as others. We would hope to see that play out again through the keeping people safe in those particular buildings, and as well in driving down that demand of our automatic fire alarms. If I take us down to the bottom right corner, as I've mentioned in previous months, this is the only real area where it demonstrates how proactive we are being as a service. A lot of the other areas are very much reactive because they are based upon the types of consultations that we receive as a service, or in many cases advice. However, I've mentioned that exception there last month. In the month of September with Business Fire Safety Week, when we've been more proactive in that space. But what I really want to highlight in this bottom right hand box is the activity carried out by our operational staff. So there's around 40 more operational audits. So this is where people do a full audit against the regulatory reform fire safety order to keep people safe and protect people within buildings, and that was by our operational staff. And that really helps us correlate again against some of that, reduction in activity in some areas i.e. operational activity, and how that's then played out within other areas of prevention and protection. Just a quick look ahead as well of obviously coming into the Christmas period. The likely areas of activity that we'll see moving into that space will be during performance inspections. So these are unannounced visits to premises where we know that stock levels will significantly increase over the Christmas period, and we'll be doing that in a very supportive way with premises to ensure that they're keeping people safe, keeping exits unblocked and free in order for people to escape the building if they needed to. And the final slide is around our prevention activity. And again, a positive news story, more around consistency, I think, is the key message for this slide. If we look at the totals on that top chart, they mirror very much the previous number of months that we've had in activity, and I would say that's very healthy activity that's proportionate to the risks within those particular areas and the resources that we have in those areas, and again proportionate, like I've said, to the risk through our community risk profile. Things that we are looking to, well, we're midway through right now, again leading into the winter months and into Christmas. We've been doing some work around candles and chimney fire safety, and what we'll see again is over that Christmas period we'll very much focus on some of those more specific elements within our safe and well visits to keep people safe and feeling safe over that holiday period. That concludes the pack for this month, and happy to take any other questions.
Well, I don't think there are any more questions, but thank you very much, James, for that. Thank you. Oh, Jonathan, you'd like to say something?
Thanks, Commissioner. It isn't a question. It's just in context to a question that was posed earlier. For our workforce and how representative we are of our communities, we have nearly 2% of our workforce that are from ethnic minority backgrounds. That's against a backdrop of 3.42 within North Yorkshire. So we are, really making progress on that area. And also for female firefighters, we have over 14%, which is against a national backdrop of 18%. So we're making progress. There's more to do, but we are on the right track and the right development path.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. And I'm glad to see we're making progress. I like that word, as you know. Thank you very much. Okay, right. So agenda item 6, any more questions from the public? And I don't think we have any. So agenda item 7, any other business, which there isn't any, and agenda item 8, and that's the date of the next meeting, which will be in January 2023. So I'd just like to say thank you so much to everyone taking part in the meeting, and also to everybody out there listening into the meeting and watching. We don't have a PAN meeting in December, but January will be a little bit longer, our meeting then. So we recognise that. And I suppose for the first time this year, I'm going to say to those that are watching, have a wonderful and very safe Christmas and the very best wishes for the new year. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.